Good. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second edition of what we call our YouTube Town Hall meeting. I'm Daryl Steinberg. I am your mayor, and I'm sitting in my office, and behind me is a wonderful work of art called The Nine Faces of Eve by an artist, Sacramento artist called Dwight T. Head. And all proceeds from the sale of his art will go to support those with developmental disabilities. And so it's a real privilege to be here with you and to recognize the fact that Sacramento is quickly becoming an art and culture haven for so many, and the best is yet to come. So I know that in preparation for this, people submitted a lot of questions, and I'm supposed to read them and answer them. So I'm a one-man show here. Here we go. The first question is, why is the city still spending so much on the police department instead of on public safety measures like affordable housing and mental health? And how does the city plan to address the concerns of Black and brown communities being terrorized by law enforcement? Okay, so this question really hits on a real tension point in the city. First of all, those of you who follow my career know that I've dedicated my public life to building a better mental health system. I'm the author of the Mental Health Services Act, Proposition 63 in California, generating $2.4 billion a year for better mental health services, a lot of it coming to Sacramento County and being used within our city to help people, especially those who are homeless and seriously ill. And so law enforcement, in my view, both police and fire, spend a lot of time, in fact, too much time, addressing the societal consequences of our failure to build a better mental health system. They're the front lines. And we do extensive training so that police especially know how to more sensitively deal with people living with serious mental illness. But the truth of the matter is, we need to continue to work to build a better mental health system so that the police department are not on the front lines. We need more crisis intervention teams that include social workers. We need more alternatives to emergency rooms, which are the only places where the police can take people who are suffering from a psychotic break or some form of serious mental illness. There's a lot of work to do. And then on the issues of the police department and communities of color, this is a difficult and sensitive issue. And certainly our city has lived through and learned a lot from the tragedy around Stephon Clark's death. And so what have I learned as your mayor? First of all, as I've said very consistently, I believe that the underlying issues are very, very real, that there is a lot of work left to do when it comes to understanding the relationship between law enforcement and communities of color, and law enforcement needs to continue to evolve, to change, to understand the history and the sensitivities, and to try to deal with communities that do feel, yes, over-policed. At the same time, I'm very proud of the fact that we not only have an African-American police chief, Daniel Hahn, but a progressive police chief, one who is a law enforcement officer through and through and proud of that, and at the same time trying to recognize that the world itself is changing. I will tell you, we've been through so much in this city, including the death of Tara O'Sullivan. And I still say, as I said in my State of the City address last year at the Pinnell Community Center, there are two truths. Number one, if you're an African-American parent and raising a teenage son especially, that you teach your kids to keep their hands at 10-2 on the steering wheel if they're ever pulled over, because the experience is different for kids of color. And at the same time, there's an equal truth. The men and women who put on the uniform risk their lives every day, and it is the most dangerous profession. And there isn't good and evil here, in my view. We've got to continue to build bridges, to build bonds, to insist on change, because change is necessary, and at the same time, not diminish or demean the very important role that that those who put on the uniform perform on our behalf every single day. And by the way, today, this question, by the way, is from Janelle. So thank you. It's from Janelle. By the way, today, after this, I'm heading down to the Melt Community Center to attend the signing ceremony for AB 392, which is the bill I supported to change by Shirley Weber to change the use of force standard to hopefully reduce the kinds of confrontations that lead to too many tragedies. So let me turn to Stuart. When will MLS come to town and officially announce Sacramento as an expansion team? Man, this is a question I get all of the time. Well, Stuart, I can't make an official announcement here today, but I will tell you that I remain exceedingly optimistic about our chances. And I know that's easy to say because what other answer could I give? But I remember this. I remember 1969 when I was 10 years old. Joe Willie Namath, the quarterback of the New York Jets, 15-point underdogs with the Baltimore Colts in the Super Bowl. When asked if the Jets would win, he said, "I guarantee we will beat the Colts." Now, I am not Joe Namath. My hair is a lot shorter, and I'm a lot older. And I will not make an absolute guarantee, but I'm coming close to making a guarantee here. We're going to get Major League Soccer. We're going to get it. And not only am I going to get Major League Soccer, but it is going to transform our rail yards, which are already, bustling between the courthouse and Kaiser and new housing projects. And soon it'll be the central shops. And, we just started with the expansion of the convention center and the community center theater, and we've got $50 million for the waterfront. Man, so many great things going on. We're going to get soccer. Stay tuned. Give us a little bit of time. It takes a long time because these are, hundreds of millions of dollars transactions, and it always moves a little slower than I want, but it's going to happen. Okay. Let me see what I got here. So Phil asks, I'm developing a nonprofit with arts-based programs for people with developmental disabilities, but it's a financial struggle. How could Measure U help me? Great question. So let me talk a little bit about Measure U because, victory has 1,000 fathers and mothers. The city sought to renew Measure U, or the idea before I became mayor was an understanding that the original Measure U, which was passed in 2013 at the end of the recession, in order to avoid deeper cuts to core city services, mostly public safety, had to be renewed in 2019. So the idea was to renew it at a half cent. I became mayor in 2016. And I diagnosed one of Sacramento's challenges, namely that we don't have enough capacity, and I mean literal capital, to be able to invest, whether it's the lack of sufficient robust youth programs, whether it's the inability to be able to loan or neighborhoods, whether it's our affordable. When I became mayor, after I recognized that the people wanted more. And not just more, they wanted the prosperity and the excitement that Sacramento's experiencing spread in all the neighborhoods, especially the forgotten neighborhoods, that I proposed in 2018 that we not just renew the half cent, but we add half cent to it. And it became Measure U Part 2, 1 cent. And it's complicated because under the California Constitution, if you're not specific about how you're going to spend the money, it's a majority vote. If you're specific, it's 2/3. So we decided to go with a majority vote. And even though I was specific on the campaign trail about this idea of inclusive economic development, neighborhood-based economic development, we won 57%. And a lot of my colleagues joined the effort. I was very appreciative, but I led the effort. And once we won, let's just say again that everybody said, this money is for X, this money is for Y, this money is for Z. And so the healthy debate ensued at the city council in the spring of 2019, where a lot of folks said, well, this second half cent, especially because we have huge pension obligations and long-term obligations, this money should go into the core city government. And I said, and the majority of my colleagues said, no, we promised the communities that we would invest it to grow a greater tax base and to give more and to give real hope to neighborhoods that had been long forgotten. The end result, a commitment of $40 million out of the 50 a year for 5 years for inclusive economic development. And within that $40 million, $250 million to bond, specifically for affordable housing, for public facilities like libraries, and for community economic development, commercial corridors, and all the other things that we want to do. So, your question, how can a nonprofit with art-based programs for people with developmental disabilities qualify? First of all, the creative economy and building a broader arts culture in Sacramento is a key piece of Measure U, because a great city, a vital city, is not just about sports. I'm excited as heck about soccer and the Kings make the playoffs this year, but I'm as excited or more excited about art and culture and all the things going on. And it begins with arts education and community-based arts, in addition to all the great traditional arts that we have in Sacramento. And so you ought to get a hold of our office, Phil, and submit an application. We're still developing the protocols. They'll probably be done by September or October to give you direction, and anybody else specifically how to apply. But you're exactly the kind of idea that we want to be part of Measure U. Sorry for the long answer, but I thought that was important to be able to talk about. Okay, here's another one. Wilhelm, how can we trust your Measure U promises to provide more affordable housing when the first project funded is an aquatic center in North Natomas? Fair question, one I've struggled a little bit with myself, but let me correct the record here. The aquatic center was not the first project funded by the new Measure U. In fact, in the budget this last year, I proposed about $16 million worth of funding for the new Measure U for community-based projects. And then prior to that, the city council approved an additional $16 million for homeless programs. So that's $32 million essentially before we even got to the aquatic center. Some of the things that the $16 million during the budget funds are a continuation of these incredible youth pop-ups throughout Sacramento, where now every Friday and Saturday night, there are multiple venues where young people can participate in safe, enriching activities, working with the community. New ball fields in North Sacramento that have been long desired and needed in a very important part of our city. The ice rink on Del Paso Boulevard got funding. Many youth-related projects in the South area got funded as well. There were a whole wide range of projects that got funded, and then comes the Aquatic Center. And so look, here's the thing. Yes, the majority of Measure U is intended to be spent on, quote, inclusive economic development. But you know what? Natomas is an important part of the city too. And they're taxpayers, and they deserve every bit that part of the investment. The council member worked hard to Angelique Ashby to get matching funding from the school district. And so it was appropriate that we put forward money for that as well. But it didn't even stand alone last week when we approved it. We also provided the beginning of seed funding. It's going to amount to about $10 million in total for a new library in North Sacramento and an expanded library in the South area in Meadowview, the Martin Luther King Library. So look, if we ever get into an either or in our city, we're not trying hard enough. There's room with this kind of capacity. If we stick to the vision and we invest this money externally into our communities to do many, many things. And my job is to make sure that we're doing many, many good and great things for Sacramento. And why aren't the homeless people who are breaking laws being arrested? And what is being done about the mentally ill people living on our streets? What's the plan? Oh man, tough question. A very important question. First of all, I have many roles. Mayor of the city. I founded a mental health institute based on the work I talked about earlier, the Mental Health Services Act, statewide institute, and I'm also the co-chair of Governor Newsom's homeless task force. A month ago, I proposed a statewide right to a roof over one's head and an obligation to come inside, a right to shelter and an obligation to take shelter, a right to housing and an obligation to take housing. Why did I do that? Because the truth of the matter is that we are doing a lot of good in this area, including in Sacramento. We're getting a lot of people off the streets with our whatever it takes approach, assertive outreach, wraparound services, low barrier triage shelter, shelter in general, and permanent housing. But it's not nearly enough. And so we need a North Star in this state that says that it is unacceptable in a civil society for people to be living in squalid conditions in the cold of winter and in the heat of summer and year round. People need to come inside, and we need to build the capacity to bring people inside. Now, my idea is not unique. New York does a version of this, and 95% of its homeless people are in shelter. It's not perfect by any means, and we can improve on it. Here's how it relates to your question. The courts, specifically the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in the Boise decision, said very clearly that until a city, any city, builds enough capacity to be able to offer everyone a bed, we cannot enforce the anti-camping laws. I don't believe people should be camping, living outdoors, but until we do our part, we don't have either the moral high ground or the legal right to be able to enforce in the way that people want. Now, where people are selling drugs or where they are acting in clear antisocial ways, that's a different story. In fact, last week, I supported the police department and the city attorney's lawsuit against 7 people on the Broadway corridor who it is alleged, and we have the evidence, that they are engaged in consistent drug dealing behavior and nuisance related behavior. And the lawsuit is to tell them they cannot hang out on the Broadway corridor. As long as the facts back it up, I support that, because I think we need to help the community as well. And that's not criminalizing homelessness. That's just saying you can't sell drugs and act in ways that hurt your neighbors. Mental health, finally, we can only help people with their mental health problems in most every instance when they are under a roof. Until we bring people indoors, you can't provide them the services. Bring people indoors first. That's my cry, both locally and the state. I'm the mother, related question, Cindy. I'm the mother of an addict daughter and son-in-law who stay under the WX freeway. Why does Caltrans have to come every week and make them leave? And why can't we bring resources to them on the street where they are? One of our key proposals that we intend to bring to the City Council on the 27th of August is to build at least a 100-bed triage shelter under the WX freeway at Alhambra. It's a Caltrans site. They are going to lease us the site very inexpensively because Governor Newsom recognizes and the state recognizes that the state needs to be a partner with local government. And where they have land and vacant land, they're going to make it easier for us to build. Why under the freeway? Because I think your question indicates exactly why that's so important. We have so many homeless people that are living under the freeway, adjoining the freeway. It's a huge source of tension with the neighborhoods, but more important, it's inhumane. And so we're going to go right there. Let me tell you our shelter strategy. I know how people feel. Everybody wants the problem to go away, but nobody wants it in their backyard. We're not alone, by the way. That's the way it is everywhere in California. But here's our principle. We are going to build these shelters in as many neighborhoods as we can, but what we're going to promise the neighbors is that our outreach is going to largely be limited to the geographic area around the shelter, so that we can say and prove, as we did in North Sacramento with Railroad Avenue, that your homeless problem is going to get better in your neighborhood because we're bringing people indoors instead of allowing them to live outside. This is a tough problem. We've got to stick with it. We've got to break through the concerns and the opposition and the fear, and we've got to get people indoors and then treat them so that as many as possible can reclaim their lives. Got to stick with it. You have no other choice. And I hope that your daughter and son-in-law get the help that they need. Or homeless questions. How can we encourage, Kevin, how can we encourage ordinary members of the community to be friends to the homeless and help them get back on their feet one person at a time? So there is so much charitable work being done here, and I applaud everybody who helps in whatever way that they can. I was at a Habitat for Humanity event yesterday. What a heroic organization. They are working with the community to actually build homes for people, not homeless people, people who certainly are at risk of homelessness if they don't get more stable housing. But here's what struck me as I sat there yesterday at their wonderful Unity concert. Their work is profound, but it is not a substitute for the society, for the government stepping up and saying, we are committed to bringing everybody indoors, and we're committed to making sure that everybody has safe and secure housing. That's why through Measure U now we have a $100 million affordable housing trust fund. That's why I'm pushing so hard. My colleagues are pushing so hard to build these triage shelters throughout Sacramento. That's why I'm calling for a right to shelter, a right to a roof over your head throughout California. What can people do? They can do a lot. They can volunteer, but you know the number one thing that people can do is just be kind. Man, we demonize people, but for the grace of God, there go I. And yes, if somebody is acting in an inappropriate or antisocial way that's scaring others, they need to be that needs to be dealt with, and dealt with firmly. But the vast majority of people on the streets are people who, well, every one of them actually once had real lives. And, it could happen to anybody. And I think a little kindness, maybe a lot of kindness, will go a long way while we rally to actually create the beds and the capacity to get people off the streets. Okay, we keep going. So does the city, Vicky, let's change the subject. Vicky, does the city council understand that we're facing a climate emergency? What progress is made on developing a working action plan? It's exactly what we're doing. Last year, Mayor Cabaldo in West Sacramento and I formed the West Sacramento Climate Commission. And let me tell you, chaired by my friend, the former executive director of CalPERS, Jens Stausball, this commission is doing real work. Not only have we called for carbon neutrality by 2045, but they are making a series of bold recommendations about how we become the electric city in California and the United States to more than meet our goals. But we're not just writing a long-term plan, we're also doing it in real time. Supervisor Phil Cerna and I co-led an effort to attract a $44 million grant from Electrify America, the Volkswagen subsidiary, to make Sacramento the center of electric vehicle mobility in California. We're the green city, $44 million. And you know what we're doing with it? We're creating these gig cars and these shared electric vehicles. We're now in Sacramento. If you're in a low-income area, many of these cars are actually located at or near where you live. Throughout most of Sacramento now, you can rent a gig car for an hour or two at a time and park it at its destination. All electric. The world is changing. And when you add jump bikes and scooters to all of that, all electric, Sacramento, I don't think we've begun to see the change that is happening. And it's generational as well. The number of young people I work with in their 20s, I'm still a young person, by the way, but younger people in their 20s who don't have cars, who get around all day with either scooters or these jump bikes. It's a different world, and it's for the better. And Sacramento is being very aggressive about climate change, and appropriately so. Okay, what is the city doing, Jerry asked, to beef up code enforcement in our neighborhoods? Well, again, Measure U, another success story, not just about economic development, but about shoring up core services. The budget adds resources for code enforcement. It creates a whole new team focused entirely on abandoned vehicles, which are our number one complaint. Code enforcement is really essential. We're adding significant resources. Hold on here. Moon asks, why don't we have a community potluck get-together like at the Pinnell Center? A little music, name tags, and a community table so we can spend some time exchanging our views in a casual setting. What a nice idea. I mean, I think those kinds of things go on all the time at community centers and certainly in our beautiful parks and throughout the community. But and with social media, it's so easy to invite people. I would participate in a potluck at Pinnell Center or anywhere. Just don't ask me to cook. That's all I ask. I'll bring something from the store, but I would be happy to participate. Okay. I think we're getting there. There's a question about reducing the burden from Debbie on homeless people on the Stockton Boulevard corridor. Only when an encampment reaches 100 plus with multiple complaints does the city act. You know what? Frustration is understandable. I know Councilmember Guetta is a great council member, is working really hard on this issue, and we're going to seek to locate a triage shelter in and around that area as well. We need more beds. And, you know, I've raised almost $100 million as your mayor, both public and private, through whole person care and some of the work we've done with the county and the new state homeless emergency assistance program dollars and what we've done at the city general fund. We got to put it to work, and we need these triage centers throughout the entire city. And I promise you that when we break through, people are going to feel better because more people are going to get help and the streets are going to be cleaner. I think I'm about done. Do we have any other questions? Oh, Mark and Trevor asked, what are we doing to incorporate video game companies into our creative economy? I know we have a couple of video game companies in Sacramento that are locating here and that are growing. And so again, the innovation economy, technology, if you've got a good idea, and we love the Bay Area, they're our partners, but if you can't afford the rent, the cost of living, don't go to Texas. Don't go to Seattle. Don't go anywhere else. Come to Sacramento. We'll help you, whether it's Measure U or other incentives. We will do our very best to work in partnership with you. Thank you to everybody. What a great way to start the day. I want to invite you to the next live stream. I want to continue to do this. I love actually meeting with people in person, and we're going to get out there and start doing a lot of Saturday office hours as well, so that I can hear from you directly and do my very best as your mayor to address the key issues in our city and to serve you well. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.